morning, world. This is Steve Rao, live on Pod and Roku TV. Greeting you from not Washington, D.C., but North Carolina, the eighth largest state in the United States of America. And today I'm going to be here for a few minutes before I'm off to go on a national public radio broadcast on Indian American influence in the elections. I'll be recording today. I've got to get my thoughts ready. They haven't even sent me the questions yet. But with that being said, I want to start off today by talking about why I'm wearing my Alexander Hamilton shirt. Immigrants get the job done. And that's certainly something we're witnessing today, this week, in Morrisville, the Research Triangle Park, where the game of cricket is being played. This game started when immigrants from India, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and other nations began to play cricket in our parks. Eventually, we built a multi-purpose park called Church Street Park, and the rest is history. Major League Cricket, the likes of Satya Nadella, the chairman of Microsoft, and other major investors have invested in this league, and it's just amazing what it's been able to do. Yesterday, I was watching the Texas Super Kings play the Washington Freedom in a packed stadium, 105 degrees out there. I was in the VIP tent, but it was amazing to see that diversity can bring in great ideas from around the world and what it can do to produce economic growth and opportunity. A real example of the true power of democracy, diversity, and the value that immigrants that come to this country can bring with their new ideas, particularly those that come here in search of a new life, a new career, new opportunities. Of course, 45% of our population is from India. So we'll be working on bringing in some guests to talk about cricket this week and later next week as the tournament unfolds. I wanted to say today to begin by just a couple of insights. First, Britain has a new prime minister, Keir Starmer. We're going to talk about him and the Liberal Party taking over power, a very short tenure for Rishi Sunak, the first Indian world leader in the world, is now out of office. Joe Biden continues to stay his ground. In a letter to congressional Democrats, he said that he was firmly committed to the presidential race. And in Wilmington, North Carolina, First Lady Joe Biden confirmed that she and her husband are in it to win it. He is not heeding to the warnings of any of his senior Democrats, including United States Senator Mark Warner and others who are asking him to stand down. A Russian strike on Ukraine killed at least 41 people, the worst attack on the country in months. And Boeing is in talks with America's Defense Department over how the aerospace giant's plans to plead guilty to fraud could affect its many government contracts. I could go on, but it's a packed day. Most of the oxygen is being taken from the debate of whether Joe Biden should stand down or whether they should actually nominate someone else to be the Democratic nominee against Donald Trump. Doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon, but it makes for good political, as I said, theater. I don't have to go to the movies very often. I just turn on my TV and get to enjoy political theater because that's what it's become. With that being said, let's bring on our panel, Mark Lee, the co-host of the show, along with others. I'll be here for a few minutes.
We've got Rick, and we'll see if Nick joins us, but Rick Rosner is here, and of course he's been following things in California where they've been dealing with fires and other things as well, but definitely they've been doing a lot of things going on in that space. I do know that Texas was hit by Merrill, and it looks like there was some significant damage in that area because it looks like nearly 2 million Houston area CenterPoint customers are without power one day after Beryl lashed southeast Texas, but it did miss Austin. But they're saying the next storm could hit the central Texas lakes and all along those lines. But there are at least 7 reported dead in that area. So yeah, like you said, there's a lot going on in the world and everything along those lines, including other investigations, because apparently an Alaska federal judge lied to investigators about sexual misconduct, and an inquiry is found that out and everything. So that was a Trump-appointed judge that resigned after reports on a sexualized relationship with a law clerk and what they're claiming was hostile work environment. So like I said, and even the Karen Reed case is got some news as well, because Trooper Michael Proctor, lead investigator in the Karen Reed case, was suspended without pay. So like I said, you got a lot going on in the political theater. And I did see a story I was going to mention. I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, and I hope Nick would join in as well, because I saw that Duke was in trouble recently because there was a report on Fox where they were getting chastised for having the medical students learn critical race theory, and apparently they're not the only university that's doing that and everything, because that is something that Fox was reporting, and they were definitely giving Duke a hard time for that because apparently it's part of their curriculum. But on another note, Johns Hopkins University, if you want to go there, if you want to be in medical school, you can now go for free, because the medical school is now free for most students at this top university after if you're ready for this, Steve, a $1 billion donation. So a $1 billion Bloomberg gift to Hopkins makes tuition free for most medical students. So if you want to go get a medical degree at Johns Hopkins, it looks like they have got $1 billion, so you can actually go there free and everything. So Nick, what's your take on this? Apparently there's a notion that you can go to Johns Hopkins, which is a premier school. I know I got my COVID certification, because I did that whole thing about being a tracer and everything through Johns Hopkins. So I did have some Johns Hopkins education in that sense and everything. But I was just wanting your take, because apparently $1 billion goes a long way. So maybe they're going to have a bunch of doctors that get to go for free because of this mass donation.
Well, I think it's a good idea. If you look at it, the cost of medical education is just way too high in this country. We need more medical doctors. And so this is actually a good thing by Michael Bloomberg to actually donate enough money to give scholarships to people that are applying to go to medical school, because it's really, really expensive. And we need more doctors in this country. We just don't graduate enough health professionals. And part of the reason people don't want to go in is the high cost of debt. I mean, the student debt here is enormous. And, if you're looking to become a medical doctor, you're looking to get, $400,000 or $500,000 in debt. And yeah, you make decent money, but you're using all your money to pay off debt. Yeah, Rick.
It came up last week. I looked it up. We have more people in America who are making their living being naked on OnlyFans than we have doctors.
Well,
yeah. Well, the other thing, there was something interesting on the internet. In other words, becoming a millionaire. All right. In this country, they were going, what's the odds of becoming a millionaire being an artist? It's like 0.004%. Being a musician, 0.003%. Being a professional, 5%. Investing in real estate, 90%. Okay. And this has been my beef about our education system. If you want to be in a millionaire in class in the United States, you must know about real estate investing. And we offer no courses, not one, at the elementary school, the middle school, or high school level. Not one. Steve, did you take your real estate investing course when you were in school?
No.
Steve? No. Okay. Why not? It is the quickest route to become a millionaire. And Rick, you're a smart guy. You take real estate investing.
No, but California just passed a thing that you have to take a financial literacy course before you graduate from high school, which is joining, I don't know, a dozen states maybe.
I totally, absolutely agree. They're starting to finally bring financial literacy in. But one important part of financial literacy is real estate investing. It shows, and it's true, that if you want to become a millionaire in this country, and frankly, almost every country in the world, you must know, not you should or shouldn't, must know about real estate investing. And so what were they trying to teach? Critical race theory? Screw that. Critical race theory will get you nowhere.
Critical rice.
Hold on. Critical. They don't teach that until college. Yeah, that's BS. They don't teach. That's a grad school subject. Critical race.
Well, it's a stupid subject. The United States and the Democratic Party are the most racist people in the world. I mean, it's just a joke. And so what they want to do is they want to teach people critical race theory. It will not make you rich in this world. Real estate investing.
Nobody wants to teach that. Nobody's.
We have Shaquille Latimer here. Shaquille.
There we go. Wait. I got my defender of critical race theory coming in. Jatovi, baby. Jatovi. Defend critical race theory. I defend real estate investing.
Correct, that nobody's teaching critical race theory in grades less than grad school.
Well, I mean, it should be at best an elective in college somewhere. If you want to take
that's what it is. That's entirely what it is.
Why do teachers want raises when they're not teaching real estate investing? I would not give them $1 dime of a raise until they teach real estate investing in the United States of America. As I went over, 90% of millionaires in this country do so by real estate investing, and we don't teach one course. Instead,
the only thing people are taught about critical race theory, that if you're lucky in high school, you might get 5 minutes where a teacher says that is it the 14th Amendment that makes slavery legal post-Civil War for people who are in prison? I've one of that, and that's all you get. That's all you get. I didn't get it taught very good because I probably have the name of the number of the amendment wrong. But that's all. You don't get to like analysis until after you've graduated college and you take a grad school course.
Well, I think we should talk about critical real estate investing. There we go. That would be
there are opportunities in real estate because we've got housing shortages. We've got
nobody's even taught the basics. All right. I would not give any teacher a dime, not one dime.
All right. Okay. All right. So we have critical housing shortages in a number of places, including all of California. But you also have to have infrastructure. We had a motorcyclist die from heat. He was cooked on his motorcycle because it was 128 degrees in Death Valley yesterday. So the whole Southwest doesn't have enough water. If you can figure out how to get water to the Southwest to support all the homes you need to build, you can make $1 trillion.
Well, you can do that through pyrolysis machines. I'm already investing in that. Crazy.
Hey guys, before I leave, I want to talk to you. I got to get ready for my National Public Radio interview, but Shaquille Adams.
NPR, that liberal organization, is that who you're going to, Steve?
Yeah, I got to interview them.
You know, they're going to be defunded under Project 2025, and thank God Project 2025 is around.
Shaquille Adams, what can you tell us about the new Prime Minister? What can you tell us about the new Prime Minister of Great Britain?
Who?
Not much.
How's it going to change Britain?
We get rid of the word great before Britain. There's nothing great about Britain anymore. I mean,
so anything about it.
It used to be great. We should change the name.
I think that, I think to be honest with you, look, I'm not a Labor Party supporter. I've never voted for them. So, you know, I'm not really sure about their internal politics. But, yeah, it does seem a little bit like, you know, he sort of stabbed Jeremy Corbyn in the back a little bit, you know, in the past. Look, I'm not too bothered that it's gone to the Labor Party. I think that the Tories, my party, deserve to get absolutely slaughtered in that election. I don't think they've done a great job. I think there's a lot of fallout as well from Brexit. And, you know, I think the Tories have taken advantage of the massive leads that they've had. You've had a revolving door at number 10 Downing Street with prime ministers coming and going. And so I think it was time for the Tories to lose. But, you know, remember that because they've got first past the post voting there, you've actually got some electoral results that seem a little bit unfair, just based on the numbers of seats won by some of the minor parties in comparison to how many votes were actually cast for those parties. But all that being said, I'm not sure the Labor Party is going to have, you know, consecutive terms, but they've won this election. They deserve to win this election. I think that that Prime Minister Rishi Sunak made a mistake by calling the election when he did. But, you know, let's see if the Labor Party can perhaps fix some of the issues that the UK is facing. And like I've said before, you know, the pendulum swings. So it swings left to right.
You brought up some good points on the last show that, you know, maybe the Democrats are wasting their time on the presidency, but can they learn anything from Britain in terms of how the Liberals were able to throw out the more conservatives? I mean, you know, Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives came in on this argument of Brexit and anti-immigrants, and we're going to make our local economy strong. It obviously didn't work. How could Britain be moving towards the left? And the United States, it seems to be the Democrats here have been having a real challenge with that. Is it perhaps just the age of Joe Biden that they've had the wrong messenger carrying the message?
Look, last year we had a couple of years ago we had the election here in Australia, and the Conservative government was thrown out here as well. And we had a Labor Party Prime Minister come in who's still in power today. I don't really think that there are lessons to be learned as such by Democrats for a couple of reasons. One, because your political system is so different to ours, and secondly, because in the case of both Australia and the UK, what you've seen is an extended period of time where the Conservatives have been in control. It's worth noting that you guys have got your midterm elections. I mean, to me, it seems like you guys never stop voting. It must be a nightmare for you guys. You're always voting on something. But you've got those midterms, you've got your Senate elections, and it's very possible for both houses of Congress to be controlled by the opposite party to the president. That doesn't happen like that in the UK or in Australia or New Zealand, for that matter. So that changes the dynamic quite significantly. But I would say, I was saying this before, prior to the 2020 election, that I think Republicans, if they want to try and contain the power of the presidency, then what they should do is actually focus more on the House, because obviously that's an important thing to control. And they should hope to control at least one of the houses, either the House of Reps or the Senate. I think that's important. I think there's too much attention paid to, the executive branch and to the presidency. And in this particular case, again, 120 days, it's a long time in politics, but early voting starts, in 70 days' time from now. So I really think that Democrats just have to come to terms with the fact that the poll numbers, yes, as I said, things can turn around, but the poll numbers don't look good. It's very hard to imagine how Biden or any replacement for Biden could possibly win the presidency from this point. So that being said, I think the Democrats really need to be very focused on the House and they need to be very focused on the Senate. If they don't do that, they run the risk of losing everything.
I've been on this. I've been binge watching a lot recently, and it's almost like a Star Wars analogy after the last Star Wars, Revenge of the Sith, where Yoda was like, we're going to go into hiding now for a while. And so I think if Joe Biden is defeated, they need to hunker down. And it's like Darth Sidious, Palpatine has taken over. And oh, God.
Biden could always chuck a Trump. He's got 4 years to get his act together and he can come back and run when he's 86, perhaps.
He can run again, but we've got Jacoby just got a question. Right. I know you got to run, Steve, but I know that
I never thought about that. That's really inspiring.
At an event that you were at as well, because he's now a commentator of 3 sports, because he does baseball, hockey, and he was just recently out there doing some commentating. I'm not sure what about the cricket.
I got a great idea. What about Joe Biden if he joined The View or something?
So Jacoby, you're on mute.
But I will say this. I will say this. I think that when we listen to Americans talking about some of the issues that they have with the political system in the United States, it's very easy for people to just say, right, we want to get rid of the electoral college system, or we want to get rid of this thing or that thing. The fact of the matter is that your country has been set up and it's been designed in a complete different way to the way that most other Westminster type systems operate. And so when you try to change something, you've always got to go back and have a look at why that was created in your country in the first place. So, it's anathema to us for the House of Representatives and the Senate not to be controlled. Well, by definition, whoever controls the House of Representatives becomes the Prime Minister, or the leader of that party becomes the Prime Minister. So what that means is that the party that's in majority is generally going to be able to get their laws passed. It is possible for the House and the Senate to be in different parties, which makes it a bit more difficult. But as a general rule, that's what you see. Now, you don't see that in the United States. And even if you do see it, it doesn't normally hold for very long. It's very rare for a political party to have the presidency, the House, and the Senate, and for that to last more than a couple of years, because invariably the midterms, it swings back to the other party. So I think that for Americans, they can get quite frustrated about the log jams that occur in Washington and the fact that things don't get passed and things just take an awful long time to get resolved. But your alternative may not be any better. So I think you've got to consider that and consider how other countries operate. I'm cognizant that Rick and Jacoby have their hands up.
Yeah, Jacoby was first and then Rick. Jacoby, you're on mute. So Jacoby, yeah.
Just to push back a little bit on the idea of just focusing on the House or the Senate, that's impossible during a presidential election due to the fact that the president title at this moment carries such weight. So therefore, the top of the ticket is always going to have an influence on the voters who vote for the House or the Senate. So at this moment, it all lies on what Joe Biden decides to do, because as many people who are coming out to push Joe Biden out, which again, I've stated this before and it's still stated now, Joe should step down and there should be somebody to take up that mantle and move forward. Truthfully, the Democrat Party, Joe was never the first pick, which a lot of progressives, even though you have the AOCs and everything, all trying to fall in line and play the hey, we're all going to back our candidate thing. Joe Biden was never the first pick. Joe Biden has been hated by many. It's just that those who dislike Joe dislike Trump more. So I don't think that it is out of the realm of possibility that if Joe were to step down and somebody were to step in, that individual could win, based on honestly the pollings, based on honestly the way that the response was with both candidates after that first debate. So truthfully, everything is, even though Trump has a 5-point lead on, a 6-point lead in the average of polling on against Biden right now. Again, it's in the mock polls with putting Harris in there. They're essentially tied. So again, we're not out of the woods yet in terms of who's going to win this election. It basically depends on what goes on with Joe over this next week. And then again, the down ballot situation is very important. And if Joe is at the top of the ticket, regardless of focusing on the House or the Senate, the Democrats have too much ground to cover and protect in comparison to the Republican Party. They'd end up losing both the House and the Senate if they just focused on that. Currently, they have to focus on it all because of the way that the down ballot system.
But they're not doing that, Jacoby. They need to decide whether Joe's actually going to be the nominee or not.
Just out of respect, can we let Rick go next? You've talked for like 10 minutes.
No, Jacoby, you're not the host. So if the host wants me to shut up, the host can ask me to, not you.
I wanted to hear what Rick said.
All right, so I mean, a large majority, 70% of Americans share the values of the centrist part of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is largely a centrist party because the Republicans have moved so far to the right. The Democrats occupy the left and center. Thing one. Thing two is watch out for polls. I looked at a post-debate poll that showed a huge hit for Biden, and it seemed like too big a hit. So I like to look up the methodology. This polling company was 100% landlines, which means it's bogus. No, who here has a landline? I have one because I'm old. And it does. Jacoby, you don't have a landline. Steve, do you have a landline?
But Rick, when you say that the Democrats are the centrist party because Republicans have moved too far to the right,
yeah,
I can understand why you might think that. But if you go and talk to anybody who's a Republican, they're going to say that they're the centrist party because the Democrats have moved too far to the left. And the problem in the United States, as far as I can see, is that people really struggle to see things from each other's perspectives. Republicans are going to say Democrats want to trans the kids. Democrats want to, have late-term and post-birth abortions and all this sort of stuff. It's not true, but that's what they focus on. Democrats say that Republicans are only interested in things like Project 2025, that they want to have all of these ultra-conservative ideas, etc. Again, it's not true. That's not what the majority of people who vote for Republicans are about, but that's what left media seems to put out there. And it's terrible to see because the issues that face the United States are pretty similar to the issues that face Canada, that are pretty similar to the issues that face the UK and Australia. Like we're all kind of going through the same sorts of things: an aging population, high debt levels, wanting to make sure that there's enough funding for healthcare and education and all these sorts of things. There's nothing particularly unusual about the political issues that face the United States. What is unusual is the amount of division, the lack of people's, as far as I can see, the lack of people's ability to actually have a conversation and to discuss the issues that really matter. And your media is just so much more divided and so much more biased. You can't get a sensible centrist response out of Fox News, but neither can you out of CNN or MSNBC.
Well, you're largely right. There's a ton of money in sowing division in media. But there's a Pew Research study, and you're also right that most Americans don't take the most extreme views of their party. But there's a Pew Research study from 2022 that shows that Republican politicians in the House and Senate have moved 4 times to the right as Dems in the House and Senate. And those people are not representative of their constituents, but that's where the politicians are.
Well, Rick, to be fair, you have to look at the working class people and how they're voting. And what you're seeing is a mass exodus of voters amongst working class voters and middle class voters, a mass exodus of them voting for Democrats. You're seeing them vote in ever larger numbers for Republicans. And that's going to be a problem. I said this years ago. Republicans have to focus on winning the popular vote, because in most other countries, everybody's able to vote, and it's really accessible and easy to vote. So when you've got restrictive rules in place in relation to voting, if the idea is Republicans are afraid that if everybody had access to a vote, they'd never win, then there's a problem. But that doesn't seem to be what's happening at the moment. And that, I think, is a real problem. Democrats have got to get their act together and start to reconnect, because I think that they have a reputation, certainly outside of the United States, as being a party of elites.
But Shaquille,
just to point out just a couple of things. The ones restricting the vote are the Republican Party, because they found out that the more people vote for the progressive.
That's what I just said to Toby. That is what I just said.
Chat, don't interrupt me. I didn't interrupt you. So that's the one thing that's going on, is that the restrictions of the votes. It's not the fact that the Democrat Party has to reconnect with a whole bunch of people. The fact of the matter is the messaging, which causes an issue. For example, right now, since the debate, we have talked about about Joe Biden and his age for a full week. Yet we have not talked much about Donald Trump and his lies and lies and lies. That's because it's baked in. People believe that his lies are baked in and that's who he is. So we can just go ahead and deal with that. But we cannot deal with the age. So it's just a matter of that messaging. In terms of the actual media itself, most of the media is owned by conservative individuals. That's most of the local media. And that local media parrots a lot of the same thing. There's been a study that's actually been done by that. And actually, there were some actual media individuals who actually put out videos of actually the local media saying the same exact thing in various markets. So it's that messaging that gets put out. But again, most of the policies themselves that are put out, even when you talk about the Green New Deal, most of the policies in there, people agreed with. The same thing with Obamacare, which has been so much attacked. Most of the people agree with the policies. It's that the Republican Party itself, which a lot of this division that you're talking about, uses that division to take advantage. Hence the reason why Donald Trump doesn't speak policy, he speaks division. Hence the reason why the leaders of the Republican Party have spoken division and not any policy, from Mike Johnson to Marjorie Taylor Greene to Lauren Boebert to even Mitch McConnell has spoken a lot of these divisive and divisive words, calling Democrats pedophiles, calling Democrats all these horrible, they bring in illegals, they do all these terrible things. That division is built in based on the messaging that gets put out in a unified name. But again,
Jacoby, along those same lines, just really quickly, because it's one of the things that I brought up. That's why Nick brought it up earlier and everything. Because I had read a story. It was actually out of one of the more conservative leaning presses and everything, that being Fox News and everything. But there was this notion, because Duke, and I know you have family members, Jacoby, that are associated with them and everything, was definitely given a very bad light, because they were putting out this notion that Duke University and most medical schools are actually teaching critical race theory and requiring that to be part of their education and all along those lines. So that was what they were attacking. And they were also talking about this notion of dressing white or dressing proper, and that being something else that was being put out there in the academic setting and all along those lines. And as you know, I'm not a conservative, but I did find that an interesting article. When, like I said, I have not just your family members, but other family members, other people that are associated with Duke. But I just wanted your take, because their notion was that critical race theory is being a required course at Duke University and all along those lines. And we do know that there are diseases like sickle cell that have a racial bias, and there are doctors and patients that like doctors of their own ethnicity treat them. So there are racial elements within the medical field. I wouldn't argue that anyway, in any kind of logic in that. But I was just wondering your take on this notion, because they really came hard after Duke University and this notion. They also went after Johns Hopkins and a number of other elite universities.
In terms of the whole critical race theory and DEI, it's all that same strain, from the critical race theory, DEI, affirmative action. It's all built from that same strain. And that's on the history of this country about fighting against equality and diversity. It's wild how that is now, based in our history. For example, people fought for decades talking about the Confederate monuments. The Confederate monuments were only put up and funded by, well, some of them were funded by the Daughters of the Confederacy. That was back in the 1900s. That wasn't even during the actual Civil War, even after the Civil War. So most of this education, which the Daughters of the Confederacy put into our educational material in the first place, was leading into this whole thing. There were no fights against the information from the Daughters of the Confederacy or any of the information there. Why? Because it was, not only was it that time, but because it was what people saw minorities, or what people saw, or in the minorities of this country, that there were 3/5 of the man and all this other thing. They were second-class citizens. And that has never been addressed or brought to an equal position. So there's still that long battle that needs to happen. And these things like critical race theory, it's just talking about the history from redlining to everything that has caused a lot of the divisions in our time today. All it is doing the histrionics about it, looking at what caused these problems of today, which is actually a good thing, because the more we can understand our divisions and what those divisions are and why those divisions are there, the better we can build bridges and come together and work together as a unified group and say, okay, I understand and I can empathize with, okay, you are a product of redlining. Therefore, I understand that you're struggling to get the same amount on a loan that I am, because of the redlining and the history. Oh, you're struggling. The war on drugs situation, which affect minorities more so than it affect anybody. The stop and frisk, which attack the minority community more so than anybody. The death penalty. So there's this institutionalized and systemic racism that is there, and that's what critical race theory was trying to explain, of what those things were there. So it's an understanding thing, but it's still the fights against that are still built off that same strain that the Daughters of the Confederacy and the histrionics of this whole country was built on. And hopefully we can start to merge and come together and understand and empathize with each other.
You don't have to start from a foundation of race. You'll get to the same place, but you can start with the foundation of, why do some Americans have a ton of money and other Americans have almost no money? I just saw a study. The average white household in America is worth $1.3 million. Now that seems crazy to me, but I'm sure there are plenty of poor white households. Why are they poor? And the average black household has $220,000. So the average white household has 6 times as much wealth. But a semester course could look at money in America, and it would encompass all sorts of things. It would encompass things like race. It would encompass geography, education, and we get, a lot of answers. And also, Nick, you want financial literacy. You could, why are some people more financially literate and able to accumulate a ton of money?
Yeah, well, I mean,
I take it then. I take it then that America has been set up specifically to help people that look like me, right? Because America, the most successful people in America, the most successful minority group in America, are people of Indian ethnicity. So I take it the United States wasn't actually designed for white people; it was designed for people that look like me. So they hate people of color except for people like me. I mean, when you reduce everything down to race, you come up with what I think are nonsensical, theories. But the issue with the CRT, the way it was asked, I'm not sure if Tofi was actually here when it was being discussed before, was having CRT as part of a medical course. Mm-hmm. Why? It's not relevant. If you're there to study human biology and medicine, CRT is not relevant. Now, I was with a female for a very long period of time, and she went to university to become a nurse. Part of her, she went to a Catholic university, and part of her course was ethics, but it was Catholic ethics. And I was rather bemused looking through her course materials, saying, why is this relevant? What does Catholicism have to, and neither she nor I were Catholics, but why was that relevant to her degree in nursing? It wasn't. It was just a filler. So I would say the same thing with CRT.
Just really quickly, I went to a Jesuit university because that's what Marquette is and everything. And I can tell you that part of what was required, and you may not like this, but the time that I was there in the 80s was, as I've said before on this show, 21 hours of courses, because it is a Jesuit university, and 9 of those were in philosophy, 12 were in religion, or I might have that vice versa and everything, but I know it was 21 in that kind of notion of
right. So I have the same. I have the same opposition.
That was actually required because it was a Jesuit university. I was majoring in journalism.
Okay. So I have the same opposition. If you are studying a particular course, right, it might be different if you're going to a university which is actually off that religion. Right. But if you're studying a course at a normal university, I don't think that you should be required to take subjects that are not relevant to the actual qualification that you're studying towards. Like, what's the purpose of that? It doesn't make any sense. Now, I also just want to point out that the AMA lobbied universities to get them to deliberately reduce the amount of places that were available to students who wanted to become doctors, because they wanted to make sure that there was a cap on the number of doctors that the United States had. Now, at the moment, there is a massive coincidence that the United States has approximately double the price, double the cost of healthcare of most of your peer group nations, and you also happen to have half the doctors per capita. But also, medical schools were threatened that if they didn't graduate students proportional to the genetic makeup of the population, then they could lose their ability to graduate students. So that, of course, means that if you are a white kid in medical school when you first start and too many people of color or African Americans drop out of that course, you run the risk of not being qualified as a doctor. So what those medical schools have to do is they have to over-enroll people of color in order to account for the amount of people that will drop out so that they still meet those statistics. Again, that might be a wonderful thing as far as building diversity, but it is not relevant to the qualifications or of the skill level of graduating doctors. So why do it?
Just a quick thing, saying that CRT or any histrionics on African Americans really isn't relevant to the medical field. Well, we did have the Tuskegee experiments, which were medical. we did have the histrionics in this country that said that African American brains were smaller than white brains. So there's a lot of history that could be learned and understood. Sickle cell, we just brought that up earlier. Honestly, they just made a TV show dealing with sickle cell called Supercell. It's on Netflix. It's actually really cool. But sickle cell affects minority communities more so than anybody. So understanding the medical field around different cultures, just because it has an African American or a minority portion to it, doesn't mean that, oh my gosh, we're doing something wrong in the medical field because, hey, we're studying about Black people. No, we've got to get out of that habit of hearing that, oh, something's dealing with people of Indian descent, people of Asian descent, people of Vietnamese descent.
So why don't you ring up the University of Nairobi and tell them that they need to study white people then, because they're only studying Black people?
We're not going to hear each other. But what I'm saying is, just because they require it and they decide, because in this country are histrionics, the minority community, African-American community was affected more so than any other, secondarily to the Native American population, which we need to actually add and require a lot more to. But the African-American community was affected tremendously and is still affected today based on a lot of the history of this country. There's nothing wrong with studying and learning about that.
It's all in the South. I mean,
why make people? If it's not relevant, why make people? If you don't think there's anything wrong with it, if you don't think there's anything wrong with it, that's fine. But why don't you let somebody else make the decision for themselves?
Why make people study real estate?
The Democratic Party is the most racist party in America.
The point being, these things
I'm going to appoint a person that's going to be a country.
Because if a person has enrolled in medicine, they haven't enrolled in an anthropological study or a sociological study. That's not what they've enrolled in. And I might remind the United States that you have more international students that come to your universities than any other country in the world. So do you really think that some kid coming from China, right, because or India, who's managed to get like the top 99.9999% in their marks in order to qualify, comes over to the United States and gives a shit about the history of Black people? No, they don't care. It's not relevant to them.
Shaq, that you're asking. So you're saying that a person from another country should not come into another country and learn about the society that they're living in. You're saying that they should stay.
I didn't say anything like that. You brought up before the 2/3, the 3/5 compromise and things like that. Okay, you brought up all of these other issues that are very relevant to the way the United States works. There is absolutely overhang from the terrible institution of slavery and systemic racism that exists in the United States. I'm not doubting that. I'm not saying that there isn't some significant problems there, but you cannot inject that issue into every single subject. Do you know how pissed off I'd be? Sasha was gracious enough to allow me to offer to tutor me in chess. Do you know how pissed off I'd be if Sasha said to me that I've got to study the history of Russia and Ukraine or Israel and Palestine before he tutors me in chess? It's not relevant to my chess game. So if I'm at university and I'm trying to study to become a doctor, these subjects are not relevant. Now, they might be nice to study, and if I want to study them, great. But if I don't want to study them, if I would prefer to go and study something else which is more relevant and more helpful to me, then I should be allowed to do so. Without you, who's not a doctor, or people in the humanities and social sciences areas of the universities trying to force the hard sciences to include these as part of their courses.
So just to point out, you are not a doctor as well. You don't do these things as well. So to say that is a moot point. On top of that, now, just as you say that people can go to other colleges or other countries, then they can choose that as well. It's the same thing when if you go to Canada and Canada decides in university, they have to study particular things for that university. If you are so upset and so butthurt that, oh my gosh, I've got to learn the history of Canada and the the Inuit people. Oh, and if I go to Australia, if I've got to learn about the Australians and the Aborigines and how they have, that, oh my gosh, I'm so butthurt over that. Go somewhere else. The thing is, you're learning about the history, and that's what they want you to learn.
You're not studying history, Jacoby. You're studying medicine.
That is what they're talking about, is the history. That is what.
But you're not studying history. You're not enrolled in a Bachelor of History.
But I mean, part of
You
it,
are
just really quickly,
the
Rick's got his hand up and
Tuskegee
everything. Hold on a
experiments
second.
were
Rick's got
a
his
part
hand
of
up
the
as well,
medical
but they want to get to
instinct,
Rick.
a part of
But there
medicine.
is this.
Jacoby, neither you nor Mark are even honest about the 3/5 compromise. You completely refuse to acknowledge the Southern emancipists as opposed to the Northern abolitionists.
What are you
You
talking
completely
about?
refuse to ever talk
We have
about
no
any of those
idea about
issues.
it.
You
History,
refuse to
you
ever
need
talk
the
about
history.
the fact that the Southern states were forced to pay 95% of the taxes at the time. We completely refuse to talk about any of that sort of stuff, right?
no
Because you have a
clue.
particular message about how much of a
You
victim you are,
have
and you want to try and force that into every subject. That's what you do, and you know it. And you know it.
Hold on a second. Don't make assumptions, because I talk about a number of things, including the Southern things and other things along those lines. So definitely, I've brought.
I'm not making assumptions, Mark. I'm not making assumptions.
You
We've
are
been
making
coming on
assumptions.
these
You're
shows
making
together for 5
assumptions. You
years,
started off
dude.
by saying an
And I
assumption.
have brought up different things, and you've been on different shows with me, and you know that I have talked about a number of things. Chuck, I'm the one that brought up Fox News. I didn't know
I'm the one
nobody
who
else.
brought up 3/5
Supposedly
on
the
First
conservatives
Day.
brought up
Dear
Fox
Lord,
News. I brought up
Shaq, you
Fox
have
News
no
and everything.
clue.
Oh yeah, I've got no
Right,
clue.
here,
Oh
look,
yes,
my
let's hear
Facebook
more
let me-
wisdom from Jacoby.
Shaq, let Rick go.
Rick,
Let me say, all right, you can study all this stuff if you have a course or a series of courses called Money in America. And people could specialize. If you want to learn how to get rich, that can be, your specialty, you can focus on that, Money in America. If you want to learn the history of why some people have a ton, some people don't have any money, you can study that. Shaq brought up, Indian people succeeding in America. And I can, off the top of my head, I can think of two reasons. One, you guys stereotypically emphasize professional attainment, getting professional degrees. Two, you guys stereotypically find miserable businesses where you can succeed if you're willing to work 24 hours a day. You guys, Indians in America, have a history of buying crappy rural motels. Running a crappy rural motel is a terrible job, but it appears to be a stepping stone to wealth. If you're willing to do the 24-hour-a-day job of running that crap motel.
Right. So if Indians can do it, and other the studies show that immigrants and the children of immigrants into the United States do better than the local population, including of the same ethnicity. So I've got family that live in the United States that immigrated there who have children around my age. Okay. Their children are unlikely to be as successful as the children of a newer immigrant from India or from Fiji. Now, why is that? Well, I don't know. There's lots of reasons why it could be. But maybe it's because those Indians that come over and those Chinese and Japanese and people from all over the world that come over and get those shitty jobs don't care too much about subjects that aren't going to help them to get ahead in life, like critical race theory or feminist stance interpretation.
Incorrect. Just to point out.
Incorrect. Oh, yeah. Okay, Jacoby. Yeah.
This is where we go into the
all about it.
histrionics. This is where we go into the histrionics. And this is why we talk about the history of this country. And if you talk about, I can't remember the psychological term because it's all part of it. But basically, if you think about it, if you take a person, we'll do an experiment right in this room right here. Shaq, you know how we go back and forth 50 million times. You already have some edge against me. You at first, I don't know what it is, but you get upset at me. But then if you bring somebody in new, you know what? That new person is going to have a good time because we're going to have a good discussion. Just as when you have brought in other people, we have a fine time. Does that mean that they're better talkers than you? They have a better knowledge and understanding than you? No, it's because they haven't had the history that you and I have. That's a very rudimentary, simple analogy of the histrionics. When you're talking about people coming in,
That's ridiculous.
no,
That's
it's not.
absolutely
It's
absurd.
knowledge. It's
Absolutely.
actually knowledge if you just understood instead of that anger and that angst that you have.
I'm not
towards me.
angry. I'm not angry.
The anger
I'm not
and
angry.
the angst that you have towards me because you consider me somebody to be ignorant, as you have said multiple times on this show. And
When have I ever called you ignorant?
you dropped the F-bomb and called me idiot. I get it. I understand that. But that's why other individuals that you bring on, we have a good time talking.
According to who?
Because they don't
According
have
to
the
who?
history. And then
According to who? According to who?
everybody you bring on.
Really? Because
So,
because
again,
because not
just
one,
point out,
not
in terms
one of the
that's
guests
a
that I've
very
brought on,
rudimentary,
not one
this
of
is
the
why we're
guests
going
I've brought
back
on have
and
come
forth.
back,
You're
have
not
they?
listening because you're already taking offense to it.
Oh, keep on going.
So,
You
okay.
have another 5 minutes,
Again,
Dave. I'll just sit back here.
Just to get back to it, talking about the history of it. So you have a long history of individuals that are dealing with the systematic and institutionalized racism within this country. You have individuals that come in that don't have that history with it. Those individuals, yes, are going to succeed more because once you have that impression built on you for decades upon decades upon decades, it makes it tough to see the light of day. This is something that I literally am working on as part of the business that I'm actually building. So I do know I have some understanding of this and dealing with the individuals that I have to deal with to build this business around that. This is the egg that I am in the midst of cracking. So don't tell me I don't know. So again, the history that these individuals have dealt with their whole lives is tough for them to deal with. And it makes it tough for them to have this giant success that you're saying that all these individuals have when they come in and they don't have that history to deal with. There is an issue that we have never dealt with in this country. And until we understand and empathize in this country, hence the reason why learning about CRT is important. Learning about the history of why redlining has caused a lot of poverty in this country, in the minority community. Why the ghettos are there, went from Jewish to African-American or minorities. There's a lot of history there that we have yet to deal with. And until we deal with it, we're still always going to have problems.
So we're a
Hang on, Rick. Sorry, because I was wanting to respond, but Jacoby didn't want me to interrupt.
We're going back and
Right.
forth. Let Rick go, and then you go. Let Rick go first.
Okay, Jacoby, again, when did you become the host? Mark's here. If Mark wants me to let Rick go, then Mark can tell me. You're not the host. You're not the host. You're not one of the producers.
That's the first thing I said because Rick had his hand up, and then you should get.
All right, we're a nation. We're a nation of storytellers. We don't teach CRT for the most part. We tell stories about it. Most people, including myself, didn't know a whole lot about the Tulsa Race Massacre until Watchmen, a superhero TV series on HBO, decided to devote a bunch of its episodes to Tulsa. There's a saying that the first generation makes the money, the second generation keeps the money, the third generation loses the money. And we don't teach that in school. Instead, we see stories on TV where the old man is the cranky old man is the one who made the money. The grandchildren are a bunch of rich idiots who are squandering the money. We learn by telling stories, which has pluses and minuses.
Now, to Toby's comments, firstly, hardly any of the guests that I have brought on, including business partners of mine, have come back after having a conversation with you. So your comment that you guys have had an amazing conversation that was really good, it's just not true. It just simply isn't true. Okay, because they haven't come back and they've specifically cited you and your interactions with them as the reasons why they're not coming back.
Mark,
okay, but you know that.
I have a guest
now,
that was Shaq's guest for a while after Shaq left. He just had some medical issues, which my heart goes out to him. Yep. So Travis was one of the ones who came through on a regular basis. So please continue with your lies.
Secondly, when I start losing my cool and swearing at him, which I shouldn't do, it's often after he's just continually tried to deliberately antagonize me for an extended period of time until I lose my cool, and then he thinks that that's piss funny. So again, I don't think that anybody would look at that and go, oh, that's a great interaction. But more to the point, in relation to CRT and all these other issues. I have fully acknowledged, and I think that everybody acknowledges, that there is a problem in the United States that still exists. The fact of the matter is that when people say the United States is systemically racist against African people and people of African descent, it is belied by the fact that even African immigrants to the United States outperform African Americans. Why is that? Now, there could be a lot of issues that Jatovi just brought up. There's a whole heap of things that could be the cause of that. But that's not relevant to a science course. If you're doing a degree in human biology or human medicine or physics or anything else like that, these subjects are not relevant. They may well be important in your view, but they're not relevant to those sorts of courses. And I think that we need to get away from forcing people to study things that they don't want to study, and also getting away from forcing people to accept things that they don't want to accept. There are people out there who do not believe that the country is systemically racist. I'm not saying that that's my belief, but there are people out there that believe that. There are people out there that think that, blacks should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. I don't agree with that, because I think I've been to the United States many times. I can see how difficult it would be for many people, especially people that are starting from behind. But there are people who legitimately feel that way. Leave them alone. You don't need everybody to be forced into viewing things the way that you want them to view it. Okay? So again, if it's a medical course, there's no reason to force people to study these subjects. There just isn't. The second thing the last thing I just want to very, very quickly say, Jatovi, when I was in Canada, there's no secret that I don't think very highly of Justin Trudeau. In fact, I had that conversation with Sasha and with his family. I have that conversation with my own family in Canada. But I also criticised the Conservatives. I think Andrew Scheer was the opposition leader when I was there last. Okay? I have these sorts of conversations. Now, you know what? I never even asked Sasha which one of those two parties he supports. Never even asked him. We just had a conversation about the two parties, their different politics, what's good about them, what's bad about them. You could do that in almost every country except for with progressives in the United States. Because with progressives in the United States, no matter what the issue is, there is no responsibility taken. There is no self-reflection. It is always somebody else's fault. For example, with the debates, it's, well, Trump lied all the time. Well, why do we only want to talk about Biden? Trump lied all the time. The reason why everyone's talking about Biden is because his numbers dropped precipitously. Trump's numbers went up. So when people say, well, if you want us to get rid of Biden, then, they should get rid of Trump. Why would the Republicans get rid of Trump? It makes no sense. His poll numbers are through the roof. The betting markets are saying he's got more than a 70% chance of winning the election. Why would they get rid of him? But again, progressive Democrats refuse to take any personal responsibility whatsoever. It's always somebody else's fault.
Just a quick couple of things. One, when you're talking about Canada, I have family in Canada too, so don't even act like I don't talk about the Canadian politics as well. I understand what you're trying to say. Is that what I said? Finish my point. Let me finish my sentence. I didn't interrupt you. Raise your hand. So, just dealing with the Canadian politics.
I'm not a child. I'm not a child in school being forced to learn CRT. I'm not raising my hand.
Do this for the last minute.
Absolutely, that's what you normally do.
Do this for the last minute. Why?
Well, that's what you normally do.
Let me finish.
It's frustrating for you.
Please,
you poor dear.
Could you
poor dear?
Because or else we're going to go back and like this, go back and forth like this.
Let's give it to Rick there.
So
Just give it to Rick so you don't have to respond.
We only got about a minute, and then we got.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish my one quick point for 30 seconds. That's all I need. So in terms of what you're talking about in terms of progressives and you can't talk to progressives this way, blah, 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 blah. It wasn't progressives that went to the Capitol and tried to burn down the Capitol. It's not progressives talking about civil war. It's not progressives.
No, you just did that to the rest of the country. You didn't do the Capitol, but you did to the rest of the country.
You're not even on the screen and you're trying to talk. So it's not progressives saying these things. The extremists on the progressives, yes, get upset. I get that. But it is the main central part of the Republican Party that really comes down on you. If you watch anything and just listen to anything, That is right now where the Republican Party is. So the discussion on that in anything. If you're talking about critical race theory and why that's needed in the medical industry, again, we get back to the histrionics, the Tuskegee experiments. That's medical. That's not talking about anything else. That's medical. When you're talking about
you can study that without studying CRT,
there
champ.
you go. You're interrupting again. And you keep talking about, oh, well, you can't get any.